You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group and co-hosts Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian from OptionPit.com, Andrew the Rock Lobster Joe Benazzi from OptionPit.com, and Henry the Flowmaster Schwartz from SEBO. The Option Block is brought to you by SEBO. When it comes to trading volatility, trust SEBO, the creator of the VIX Index, for in-depth and relevant information. SEBO's tools and services gives you up-to-date trade insights, analysis, and positions of VIX options and futures. No matter what kind of trader you are, there's plenty of useful information to take the guesswork out of creating your portfolio strategy and to help you make more educated moves in the market. Visit www.cboe.com/VIX today to learn more. The views expressed herein are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of CBOE Global Markets Incorporated or any of its subsidiaries, collectively CBOE. The information provided is for general education and information purposes only. There are important risks associated with transacting in any of the CBOE products or any of the digital assets discussed here. Before engaging in any transactions in those products or digital assets, it is important for market participants to carefully review the disclosures and disclaimers contained at www.cboe.com/US_disclaimers. These products and digital assets are complex and are suitable only for sophisticated market participants. These products involve the risk of loss, which can be substantial and, depending on the type of product, can exceed the amount of money deposited in establishing the position. Market participants should put at risk only funds they can afford to lose without affecting their lifestyle. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again, back from the weekend. Hope you had a good weekend out there, had fun with friends and family, got away from your trading screens. Hopefully, if you're into football, your team did well. Chi-Town, not so much over there on the weekend. Glad I didn't go. One of the most expensive, if not the most expensive games in regular season Bears history. Nearly $600 just to walk in the door for the top of the nosebleeds in the 400 level. And to say they did not perform well is putting it mildly. So yeah, it would have been money down the drain. So glad I didn't go. So I guess from that perspective, I am much richer today than before that game yesterday. So good time. Hopefully your team fared better. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the TAG, OptionsInsider.com, as well as from the ever-engaging network upon which so many of you are just driving up the old bandwidth. If you like what you hear, you want to help defray that bandwidth, and by all means, write some nice comments, some ratings, some reviews, and wherever you get this content. It does help new people continue to discover the show, and I guess, in turn, continue to drive up my bandwidth. So thanks for nothing, but it does help new people discover the shows. And, of course, if you want to go above and beyond, you want more content in your lives, and who doesn't? You want exclusive, great pro Q&A sessions. You want options oddities for unusual activity, things that make you scratch your chin and say, maybe I'll take a look at that myself. So much more, live streams, giveaways, theoptionsinsider.com/pro, the place to go to learn more. As we go around the horn, I'll introduce them now because we have some business to take care of at the top of the show, listeners. I am joined by the uncleest of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, and by the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Why do I introduce them now, listeners? It is time for that Monday tradition, the mother of all traditions, some might say. It is time to name that 80s wrestler. Here we go. All right, listeners. 80s wrestling. It continues to reverberate into the modern era. In fact, a few weeks ago, a big other promotion, not WWE, I should say, came to town for a show. My son wanted to go. We ended up going to it. And lo and behold, how do you get people in the door these days? Why, you trot out some old 80s wrestlers to get people excited. Folks like me who grew up watching those guys. We'll go see those old 80s wrestlers, because why not? Not to wrestle, probably, because they're all in their 70s if they're still alive. But it's still fun to see them out there alive and kicking and doing some promos and fun like that. So a couple weeks ago, I was just a few feet away from an iconic 80s wrestler out there. One of the ones that people know and love from the 80s. His run in WWE was kind of, I think to call it sporadic is probably the best way, because he kind of came and then he went, and he came and then he went again. He had an early run out there with Ric Flair and other promotions out there where they supposedly had some legendary hour-long matches that kind of just built his name. Came to WWF, had some great matches, including still to this day, people look back on all the history of wrestling. They talk about a few matches that are just heads and shoulders above the rest. One is Shawn Michaels and Undertaker from, I think, early 2000s. And one is this one, Macho Man versus this wrestler from the heydays of the 80s, which still holds up even to this day. People still say it holds up with modern wrestling, and it has a lot of your high-flying stuff people like today, all this kind of stuff. It was on display back then from this wrestler. So I see some buzzes. I could go on, but they're ready to buzz. They're ready to guess. Let's go out to the Unkless of Mike's first. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, who was I standing just a few feet away from a couple weeks ago?
Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Yes, Ricky the Dragon. This promotion, AEW, brought him out to kind of talk smack to some guy, and he got challenged to a strap match at 70 years old, and instead he said, no, I'm going to toss it to this other person who goes by the American Dragon. That's why they brought him out there. So it was a little bit of a passing of the torch moment, but it was fun. Ricky looked pretty good. He could still move and speak, which is more than a lot of those guys can do. So it was something to see. So yes, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, listeners, one of the greats. Even if he had a sporadic tenure in WWF/E, his overall resume speaks for itself, and still out there collecting a check all these years later. As we keep on rolling right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the trading block.
Ah, yes. Good old Ricky the Dragon. Fond memories, and still out there carving it up, which is good to see. The market's kind of carving it up today as well. Emphasis on the upside. They're back in the green today. S&P up about 0.5%. A Dow up about not quite 0.25%, but pretty close. And the NASDAQ up a little over 0.75%, about 0.8% right now. So a lot of green on the screen. More buyers than sellers. Apparently all the worries of heading into the weekend are now behind us, listeners. We got the fruit company rallying a little bit up, about 0.6 points. So there you go. It was a big weekend for the Diz. They had their D23. People were really looking forward for them to actually announce something. They broke the 80 handle last week, 79 3/4. They are popping. They're up about 70 cents today, which is surprising because they didn't really announce anything interesting. But I guess the deal with Charter Communications ahead of Monday Night Football is enough to pop them a little bit. But still, this stock, you have to go back till about 2014 to find it the last time it was at this level. So right now, things not looking great for the Diz, even if they are popping a little bit today. Things not looking great for the vol market either. All this green on the screen mean VIX taking a hiatus, 1390 when we kicked off the show. Down a little over a point, about 1.1 points from where it was on Thursday. VVIX 86 down 4 points. VXX 21 down about a full point out there as well. UVXY 1390 down a little over a point, about 1.1 points as well. That's the magic number today, 1.1. UVXY just steamrolling towards yet another reverse split. SVIX 3180. I think that's another new all-time high for SVIX. Let's go check it out really quickly. It's up 1.8 points. Actually, the new high was not that, but it set another one today. It was 3206. It actually got higher intraday. My goodness. 32 handle. Here comes SEP 35s. Here we go. UVIX 290. Who gives a crap? Down 1/3 of a point. They clearly don't. And VolQ 1680 down over 1.5 points, about 1.7 points. So they're coming for NASDAQ vol today. All right, let's go out to the winner of our 80s Wrestling Trivia Challenge. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, any enduring memories of one Ricky the Dragon Steamboat? B, did I see you out there near the front row to see Ricky the Dragon, too? I could see you cheering on one Ricky the Dragon. And then C, what's catching your eye in a mostly Uncle Mike type of day, sir?
A lot of love for Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. He had... I wish he could have gotten spotlighted more, because he was really ahead of his time in terms of being able to be the athletic wrestler that he was. He looked like an early version of a lot of the luchadors that came into WCW in the late 90s. He was doing a lot of those things back before they were cool, and he was doing them in the 80s. And, the thing, I remember him going into the match against the Macho Man, and he couldn't breathe for a while. Watching the therapy of him trying to learn how to talk again, say he, and it was very very dramatic, let's just say, for me being the grade schooler believer with which I was at the time, and to a lot of extent still am. So really liked Ricky the Dragon. He was definitely one of my top favorites. I wish that the ones that I really wish could have been around the WWE longer were, like we talked about, I think it was last week or the week before, the U.S. Express, Barry Windham, Mike Rotundo, and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Those were three that I really liked that were gone way too early from the WWF of the 80s. So with that being said, though, one thing that is not gone right now is the Bull. The Bull lives on from the 80s, even through today, even before the 80s, and even beyond today. The Bull is still here. Markets are up slightly on the day-to-day, like you said, about 0.5%. We're not getting a lot of rally from tech on the day-to-day. We are getting a little bit of movement out of Apple. Apple's up 50 cents on the day, which is not a big day for Apple by any means. NVIDIA is down $8 on the day. That's really not that big of a deal for NVIDIA with how much it moves, but the big company that's lighting up my tape today, we have Tesla up over $20 on the day. That's not surprising, but it is definitely noteworthy when you see a stock move that the size of Tesla move that much. Tesla does make big moves. It's a very volatile stock, but $20 is $20 when you go from 250 to 270 in a day. So we have that going on today. Overall in the sectors, the main sector that I'm showing with any legs to it, we have the consumer discretionaries. Once again, tech, XLK, it's actually down 5 pennies on the day, so we're not getting a lot of move there. This is definitely not a tech-driven rally by any means, but we are getting that. Not really a lot of things sticking out right now with where we are in terms of the things that are lighting up my tape. We don't have a lot of move with VIX. I'm sure Mark's going to give us some more education on the weekend effect with VIX and how it's handling the weekend and what it's doing today. And that's really all I'm seeing right now.
All right, you have invoked him, Mr. Meatball, sir. Any enduring memories of one Ricky the Dragon Steamboat? And B, what is catching your eye out there in a mostly Uncle Mike type of day?
Yeah, what I remember is he had this great run in the NWA, which later became WCW, and then they brought him over to the WWF, and of course in WWF fashion, they couldn't just let him be a good wrestler. They had to put him in this ridiculous dragon outfit to walk out in, and again, yeah, he was such a good technical wrestler. You're going to be hard pressed. I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a bad match with him. There's maybe one. The guy was just so good at executing. So that's probably my biggest enduring memory of him. Again, it should have been a bigger star, but in WWF, but back then it was. They want these roided up, huge guys. They didn't want the technical guys to be. That's why it's almost amazing that Macho Man was able to get as big as he was, because he's not he was fit, great body, everything like that, but he was not the big hulking giant that Hulk Hogan was, or the Ultimate Warrior, or all these other guys that Vince McMahon seemed to love. But if Ricky the Dragon had come up in 2000, 2001, even 1990, post steroid era, after the steroid bust, I think he would have been a massive star. And it's just timing off by about 5 years.
Yeah, he would have been huge in the era. Look at Shawn Michaels. He became the biggest guy going, and he's definitely not a steroid freak. So, yeah, there was an era for him. He just missed it. You're right. But Mr. Meatball, what's catching your eye out there in the markets today? By the way, you have a comment in our chat, which is a good one. They mentioned Ricky Steamboat trained with Jay Youngblood against the Briscoe brothers in the very first Starrcade in 1983, which inspired the first WrestleMania in 1985. So there you go. Ricky the Dragon, his impact. If that match wasn't any good, they wouldn't have tried to rip it off for WrestleMania and do their own event. So, there you go. Ricky the Dragon having an impact that is being felt today. And Mr. Meatball, some impact out there on the markets, mostly to the upside, sir. What is catching your eye?
Yeah, Apple seems to be stuck. It looks a little sick. They tried to rally it on the open and it got soft. But we've got huge strength in consumer cyclicals. So XLY, the big winner of the day. Why? Well, Tesla and Amazon are having huge days. Some decent strength out of Meta and Microsoft is having a day. But then you've got NVIDIA down a little bit, Google pretty flat, Apple looking a little soft. And then energy opened up pretty nicely, and then they've sold it off today as they've rotated out of energy and into consumer cyclicals. We continue to see this weird, the market kind of stays in a range. It's been stuck between 4,430 and 4,500 now for about a week. But that doesn't mean individual stocks aren't moving. We've got big rotations happening just about every day between, money coming out of tech and into consumer cyclicals, and then coming out of consumer cyclicals and into energy, then out of energy and into discretionary. So the other one is the utilities. They're up 4 days in a row. We have not seen that in a while. So that's something to kind of note. Looking at the vol index, VIX is up 0.4, which is down after the weekend. When you consider the effect, vol looks like it is going lower, and I think there's potential for if we continue this kind of low realized vol market, you could see the VIX kind of throughout the week just soften and soften and soften.
We shall see. That is certainly your vol prognostication for the crystal ball on vol views. We shall see if that comes to pass out there. Listeners, as we see what's coming to pass right now out there in ye old markets from a volume perspective. Remember, we broke down the numbers from OCC on the network last week, listeners, in August. Spoiler alert, a banger month, second busiest month of all time, which is something to say when it's August. So intriguing stuff. What do we have in store for us now that we're coming in to September here? Usually the time of the year when the doldrums of summer are over and we're starting to see a little bit of volume make its way back into the market. It seems like we're doing the opposite this year. We had the volume in August, and now we're taking a hiatus here in September because VIX doing a whole heck of a lot of nothing right now. 203,000 contracts on the tape. The ADB 628 out there. So that ADB continuing to come off. It was 750 for most of the dog days of summer, and now it's down to 628. So again, weird times we're all living in. SPY, 4.2 million. So that's kind of about in line with what you expect for SPY these days. The ADV is right around 8.5 million out there. The S, same deal, pretty much right in line with expectations. The new normal for SPX used to be a million contract at this time of day, banger day. Now the new normal with all the 0-day stuff is around 1.5 million this time of day, and that's exactly where they are right now, 1.5 million. So living up to expectations out there in S-land. The ADV, almost 3 million, 2.93 million out there. Small caps, 477,000 contracts on the tape over there. The ADV, 829. By the way, small caps up about 0.5% today as well. So the rally continues across all major indexes out there. And the Qs right now, listeners, 1.9 million. The ADV, 3.77 million. So they seem like they're on pace to hit that out there today as well. Let's get out to the single names and see what kind of day we're having out there, listeners. Is it a banger day? Is it a quiet day? The answer is kind of in the middle. I guess if you had to pick one, it would be leaning towards the quiet. We just broke 200,000 a few minutes ago. 202,000 now is what it cost you to break into the top 10. That gets you to the former King of the Apes. I don't know what title it really holds these days anymore. It's up, it's down, it's all over the place. It's AMC, again, good for 202,000 contracts, and the number 10 spot on our countdown. It's also trading at $7.10. A lot of tens lurking out there, off about 9 cents today. So not a huge day for them, but good enough for 202,000 contracts. Number 8, we got a lot of the same players here, just shuffling the deck a little bit today, listeners. Number 8, we got, it should be number 9. Number 9, we've got the artist formerly known as Facebook. Now it's Meta. 304 3/4, up about 685, or about 2.3% today. Good for 225,000 contracts. And the number 9 overall spot. Number 8, this deal, this spinoff has kind of been the gift that keeps on giving from an options volume perspective. This is that whole J&J KenVue thing. Of course, we're talking about KenVue now. Ticker symbol KVUE, good for 242,000. This one has kind of lit up our radar ever since this deal was announced. And for the last few weeks, it's certainly been putting up a lot of volume. It continues today, 242,000. KVUE up 70 cents, trading $21.99 right now, listeners. It's up about 3.25% today. Are you out there? Are you slinging some of this KVUE J&J ARB? Are you all over the place out there with this thing? This thing's putting up some numbers out here, which is kind of interesting. And again, I'd like to see some new blood breaking into the top 10, even if it is part of some funky deal ARB. We'll see how much this paper, how much resilience this have, how long lasting it is. Usually these deals, not usually, but we shall see. Number 7, the name I was just talking about, listeners. I expected to see this one on the tape on Friday. We didn't, because it broke, the 80 handle got into the 70s for the first time in ages, since over a decade. And of course they had their big D23, but we're seeing them today instead. It is the DIZ, 268,000 contracts, and the number 7 spot. Managing to pop a little bit today. They have bounced about 2 3/4 from the low they hit on Friday of 79 3/4. Up 83 cents today, trading 82.41 right now. A lot of people were hoping for a lot more insight from them over the weekend on the future of the parks. That was their big parks conference. And there's a lot. The only real division that's making money for them, kind of keeping them afloat right now, is the parks. And so they really need to bring the hammer there, because Universal and some others have them square in their sights, and they're launching some big new stuff in the next year or two. And so far, Disney has no answer. And people were hoping that answer would come this weekend, and it did not. But stock's still rallying a little bit today. I guess this looks like it is this Disney charter deal. And again, ESPN has been kind of an albatross around their neck for a while, so they're trying to work that one out. But the parks have not been, so people were hoping for some more things to really drive some future anticipation out there. And didn't really see it, but the stock popping today. Number 7, 268,000 contract. You like Disney now that it's threatening a 70 handle, listeners? 79 hit on Friday. You want it to drop even more? Are you not in on the old Diz? Maybe that might be a good poll question for one of these weeks out here. Let's go out to number 6, back to the AI realm. It is Palantir, popping hard today, up 72 cents, trading $15.84, up nearly 5%. They've been coming for this one for a while, and I guess today is the day where the bulls strike back, listeners. It's good for 306,000 contracts. And the number 6 spot. Number 5, keeping things in Techland, the other half of the chip zone, really today, the first half of the chip zone. It is AMD, good for 327,000 contracts. And the number 5 spot, trading 104.20, off $1.90, so a little bit of weakness out there for AMD today. They got as high as 107.5 today, so. And they crushed it down to 103 even, so $4.50 range on the day for AMD, hanging out at the lower end of that right now, but not quite at the nadir. Number 3, another A-related tech name. It is the Amazonians. Number 4, good for 608,000 contracts here. Amazon number 4, 141.76, up $3.50 or 2.5%. So a nice little pop for the Amazonians today. Intriguing stuff. Number 3, yes, I said number 3, listeners. It is the Fruit Company. 629,000 contracts. 179.14. The Meatball said this one was sick today. Let's see. It's had about almost exactly a $3 range. 180.30 on the upside. 177.34 on the dark side. We're hanging out middle-ish on that one right now at 179.11, up about 93 cents on the day right now. So they are managing to rally it, which is probably why the market's green. The market likes it when Apple is rallying. Of course, there's rumors on the horizon for new iPhones, all that fun. So apparently that's giving them a little bit of a boost today. Number 2, the other half of the chip zone. You know what it is, listeners. It's NVIDIA. AMD is down. Can NVIDIA be up? The answer is no. 449 even right now, off about 6 3/4 or about 1.5%. Yeah, interesting stuff. Continuing the trajectory over pretty much the last couple of weeks where the stock topped out at 502. And then it seems like that was a bit of a bridge too far, even for the AI diehards, because they've driven it back down to about 449. Still on the year, they have exploded this thing to the upside. It's up 210% or 304 handles. So only the world's tiniest violin playing for those bulls out there. But either way, intriguing stuff out there. And again, number 2 today, 764,000. That can only mean number 1 is the usual king regaining its throne, listeners. It is Tesla. Good for 2.27 million contracts. Man, that's pretty much double the paper it's normally doing right about this time. That's quite the deal. Morgan Stanley is getting all hyped about their Dojo supercomputer. Again, you don't need to have any real reason for Tesla to move. It's a day that ends in Y. You're getting all this drama now, Musk and Gates getting recycled into the atmosphere. All sorts of fun floating around Tesla today. Good for 271.90, up 23.40 or 9.4%. So there you go, listeners. A lot of optimism out there in Tesla land apparently today. Let's go out to the earnings front. Is there still some optimism to be had out there? I guess it depends where you look. Today we have Oracle popping off after the bell. And then we have on Wednesday, if you like some good old country dining, Cracker Barrel on the docket. Thursday, Adobe. Also, Leonard Holmes out there. So we still have some names popping off that you have heard of out there, listeners. Luckily for you, because we like you folks, we have the earnings move results, earnings season, and earnings trades reports, all hot off the presses from our friends over there at ORATS, all recently updated. Let's look at Oracle right now. They're popping off after the bell. 126 1/3 is where they were when we ran this report earlier this morning. Straddle $6.36. In the past, they moved $5.33. So $1.03 worth of extra juice out there in Oracle. Is it merited, listeners? I don't know. That's not a name we talk about on the network a lot here. Good old Oracle. Looks like it's popped almost $1 since we ran this report. It's trading 127 1/4 right now. So it had a nice little pop here. Adobe 14th after the bell. We talked about them recently. 560 1/3 is where they were when we ran these numbers. They were pricing in $30.15. In the past, they moved $21.90. So Adobe pricing in just a banger earnings report in one direction or the other. I don't care which way, listeners. They're pricing in some vol. They're pricing in some juice. Is that merited? Again, another one we don't really talk about a lot here on the network, but a fair amount of extra juice lurking out there in Adobe, which is certainly intriguing in and of itself. The season also intriguing, hanging out almost exactly at par, listeners, 101% right now. The long-term average, 98%. So we're pretty much right in line with the averages, which is also surprising to a lot of people. A lot of people thought Q2 earnings would really be where the worm turned this year, and so far, that has not been the case. Let's see if the odd block is where the show turns, listeners, because it's time to get weird and get wild and unleash the Eye of Sauron.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Odd Block. Got Option God in our chat asking, did you see Ricky the Steamboat? It's not Ricky the Steamboat. It is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Thank you very much. Talk about a ridiculous nickname, the Dragon Steamboat. Absurd. Absurd stuff out there that the 80s wrestling was. You know what else can be absurd on occasion, listeners? It could be a little bit of weird, wild, unusual activity. Let's see what the Eye of Sauron has in store for us today. Mr. Meatball, put on your options analyzing pants, because here we go. First, we go off to the cannabis sector. Not one we've talked about in a while for really obvious reasons. There hasn't been much going on in any of these names. Tilray or Constellation or today's name, Canopy Growth Corp, CGC. A few years ago, meme stock palooza days, these things were all the rage. They were hot, they were popping, they were rocking and rolling. These days, kind of languishing. I guess this whole green boom that everyone was anticipating, kind of fizzling out there. I guess when the reality of taxes and everything else hits the road out there, distribution, logistics, real world economics hit the bubble, kind of pops it, I suppose, because most of these names, they're up. They have been kind of languishing for a while. And this one, Canopy Growth, again, we haven't talked about this in forever. Popping hard today, trading right around $1.50, up about $0.50. So big day out there for good old Canopy. Again, this is the name we talked about a while ago, then it kind of fell off our radar. The stock itself, the stock was 35 cents not too long ago. Not a lot of options paper to parse when the stock is 35 cents, but here we are, $1.50 right now. Let's see, on the year, a year ago, it was $3.83, listeners. And they drove it up to the high for the year of 4 3/4. That was on December 5th. And that seems like that was all she wrote. It was trading 38 cents less than a month ago, August 16th. So there you go, listeners. Did you take a flyer on Canopy Growth when it was 38 cents? I'm sure a lot of you are wishing you did now. It's trading $1.46 right now. Let's see what we got out here, Mr. Meatball. You know what? The kind of paper you would expect when a stock pops 50 cents or about 60% in one day. You got some call paper. In particular, you got someone coming out here today, Mr. Meatball, and scooping the SEP 1/2. So they're not going out that far. This is pretty much a weekly trade, listeners. They picked up 6,056 of the SEP 1/2 for roughly a third of what the stock cost just a month ago. 13 cents they paid for these. The stock at the time was $1.32. It was a 348 vol, if you are intrigued by such things, listeners. I'm going to go out on a limb and say these are looking pretty good already, Mr. Meatball. What are your thoughts on this pop we're seeing in the whole cannabis sector and this call love we're seeing right now in CGC, sir?
Yeah, I mean, there's call love all over the place in the cannabis sector. MSOS, the ETF, is blowing higher. Canopy Growth blown higher. This potential change in regulatory action, you're seeing the big lift ahead of it. And then we'll see what happens if the change actually happens. I would imagine it would be a fade, but near term, this whole sector looks like it's going straight up.
Have you spotted any other interesting flow out here in all of your flow analysis, sir?
Yeah, MSOS is the big one. They're long a boatload of the 10-15 call spread in October. And today they're buying the 10-17. Looks like that's gone up a bunch. So, or the 10-14, I'm sorry. The October 10-14 call spread has gone up north of 30,000 times in the last week.
Interesting. That is the pure U.S. cannabis ETF, listeners. Why would you want the impure ETF? You want the pure ETF. Luckily, MSOS has you covered. Trading $9.12 today, listeners, up 81 cents or nearly 10% today. So, yeah, a green across the board, ironically, for the green sector, a.k.a. The cannabis sector out there. Let's go on out. Let's keep on rolling, see what else our Eye of Sauron found other than a lot of upside paper in cannabis stocks. Let's go out to the chip land, in particular, Microchip Technology, Inc., ticker symbol MCHP. I wonder what they do. I like when the name is straightforward, listeners. Trading $79.50, up about 70 cents today. On the year, let's see, a year ago, it was trading $67.50, so pretty much exactly $12 below where it is right now. And it's kind of mostly made its way north. Looks like it topped out on July 31st at $94.30. So it has come off a wee bit. So a little bit of a tale of two stocks here. The long rally up, and then it kind of since July 31st, it has been mostly downside, including giving up about 3% over the past month out here. So what do we got? What did our Eye of Sauron find out here today? It looks like somebody perhaps saying this far and no farther to the downside in the stock. And they're drawing the line in the sand this time on the 70 strike, selling 9,740 of the Nove 70 puts, getting a fair amount of juice for them, $1.17. So not explosive, but not nothing either. A decent little amount of juice. That's about a 35 vol, if you are so inclined, listeners. And the stock was actually a little bit lower. It was about $0.50 lower, $78.97 when they put these up. So getting a nice little pop. You sell puts for a decent amount of juice, get a nice little pop. There are worse things, By the way, this line in the sand, interestingly enough, does extend through earnings, listeners. We don't usually see that. Usually they cut it off right before. But this time they decided, you know what? We're going to roll those dice because the earnings are on November 2nd, so they're going to have that in this cycle unless they take these off early. So intriguing stuff. Mr. Meatball, are you a fan of these line in the sand puts in everyone's favorite name, microchip technology, sir?
I saw this paper going up. The stock looks like it's trying to break lower. And this paper seems to be kind of thinking that something like that could happen. This sucker has definitely a lot of the microchips have been flying around, and this put they're saying we'll buy it below 70, but we don't like it up here. And then you also have some SEP action that is saying maybe this thing could go lower. A lot of call selling today, a lot of put selling. So they're calling a top and saying when I want to jump in.
Intriguing. Yeah, not the worst put we've seen out there by any margin. Intriguing. We'll keep an eye on these as we always do, listeners, as we keep on rolling out here with our final victim today. It is in Copart Inc., ticker symbol CPRT. If you're not familiar with this name, listeners, they are a global provider of online vehicle auction and remarketing services to automotive resellers, such as insurance, rental, fleet, and finance companies. So there you go, listeners. Very, very detailed description of your favorite new name. Copart trading 44 3/4, up about a dime here today. Let's see, on the year, decent year here for Copart. It was 29 1/4 a year ago, and it got down shortly thereafter to the low for the year of 26.15. That was in late September. Since then, it has been pretty much straight up. Looks like it topped out at about 47 1/3 on July 17th. Ever since then, it's kind of been vacillating in this mid to low 40s range ever since July. So it had a nice run up from September all the way through to July, going from about $26 at the low all the way up to almost 47 1/3. And then it's kind of just been treading water ever since. So interesting. Again, kind of a tale of two tapes here as well. What did our Eye of Sauron find? Maybe it thinks, or somebody thinks, we are poised for yet another breakout to the upside, because somebody coming out to play on some calls that, quite frankly, are fairly rich. They came out and bought 2,000. It's not the biggest trade on the planet, but again, it is Copart, so bear that in mind. They bought 2,000 of the October 45s for $1.38. The stock at the time was a little bit lower, 44.63. This is the 25 vol, if you are curious. And let's see, there are going to be earnings. Earnings are actually coming up in a couple of days. So that's interesting. They're on the 14th. So if they had wanted to take a swing at earnings, they didn't need to go all the way out to October and spend $1.38. They could have just bought the weeklies, and that would have saved them a heck of a lot of money, and they would have got the earnings either way. So an intriguing choice. Maybe buying more premium than they need, Mr. Meatball, if they're looking for the earnings. What are your thoughts on everyone's new favorite name, sir, Copart?
This is not one I've seen before, but kind of interesting. I mean, when you've got a stock that doesn't really trade very much, and you see moves like paper like this, it makes you think maybe there's going to be a little fall through here.
Yeah, it's always fun to find some newer names to discuss here on the network. Not that we don't like talking about your Apples and your Facebooks and your Teslas and all that fun, but it's nice to have some newer names for you folks to sink your teeth into. And we always enjoy sinking our teeth into the strategy block. So let's do that right now, listeners.
It's time to dispense options, wit, wisdom, and education. It's time for the Strategy Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Strategy Block. Uncle Mike, we are starving. We are famished for strategery. We were off, of course, last Monday, so no Strategy Block. It has been 2 weeks, dare I say it, an eternity, since last we sat at the foot of Uncle Mike to bask in some strategery, sir. What do you have in store for us to break our fast, sir?
You dare say it. I'm coming down from the mountains with my bubble pipe. I haven't done that in a while, have I?
No, you have not.
So what I want to talk about today is I want to encourage our listeners to revisit calendars, and not necessarily saying it's the best, most ideal thing to do by any means. It never is. No strategy is ever ideal. But in case you're typically a vertical person or you're a directional trader and you're just haven't been doing calendars for a few years because volatility's been so high, it might not be a bad time to revisit it. Since the summer has been happening, we've had lower volatility. And with volatility lower, sometimes that can make things better or more favorable for a horizontal trade, whether you're bullish or bearish. Now, an example would be, let's say that you look at good old-fashioned XYZ stock, and you believe XYZ stock is at 55 right now, and you think it's going to go to 65. So perhaps normally you would buy a 60-65 vertical call spread. Nothing wrong with that by any means. But when doing that, it might make more sense to just take a look to see what the delta ratios are of perhaps doing a 3-month 60 call or buying a 3-month 60 call and maybe selling a 1-month 60 call. Not saying that's the ideal strategy by any means, but it's something to think about, doing an out-of-the-money call spread. Now, what can this be beneficial for? Well, with horizontals, a lot of times you can get a pretty nice risk reward for the amount of money that you put out. A lot of times you can get a good amount of deltas if it's timed out well for less money. And so what I like about the horizontal or the diagonal, either way you want to slice it for doing something with different expirations, is that you do get a little bit more flexibility from it. If you are just buying, say, a vertical 3 months out or 2 months out, whatever time frame you decide, you're trapped in that month for expiration. There's no adjustments to be made. There's nothing to take advantage of if volatility goes lower or higher or whatever the case may be. You're in that. And there's nothing wrong with that. The bottom line is if the stock goes high enough, you will make money, which is ultimately what you want to do. Now, with a horizontal, you can also make similar money, sometimes faster and sometimes for less risk. And that's the consideration to take when going from vertical to horizontal and making some type of a decision on what type of trade you'd like to make. Now, the disadvantage of a calendar spread, of course, is if the market or the underlying stock goes up way too far, you will miss out on it. So you have to understand that that risk does exist. And sometimes you can be too right. So in other words, let's say you bought that call spread, the horizontal as I described, and the stock went to $80 a share. With the vertical, you're smiling. With the horizontal, you're kicking yourself because you did this bullish trade and it went too far for you. So just have an understanding of what your risk reward is. I like looking at horizontals and diagonals when volatility is lower. And over the past few months, by comparison, it has been. And that's the strategy block for today.
All right, listeners, now it's time for all of us to dive into a little bit of the old mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the Mail Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Mail Block. Our chat's still going back and forth about Ricky the Dragon. I love it. I love it out there. Yeah, it is a somewhat incongruous name, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Doesn't make a lot of sense on the surface. As one of our pro members points out, they say Ricky took the last name of Steamboat from the 1960s wrestler Sam Steamboat. Yeah, I had heard about that. I think when he showed up at, it wasn't a WWE, it was before that. I think it was a different promotion. And I think they said to him, hey, the Steamboat guy is wrestling. I forgot if he looked like him or what the relationship was. But they said, hey, you're now going to be Ricky Steamboat. He was like, all right. So, yeah, those two names, the Dragon Steamboat, don't make a lot of sense. But, hey, if you look at it, does 80s wrestling really make, or does any wrestling really make much sense? The answer is no, listeners. Let's get on out to your questions. and our results from our polls last week. Do the results from our polls last week make a lot of sense? Probably not as well, because we were doing some fun polls last week, listeners. Because it was a shortened holiday week, we were having a little bit of fun, a little playtime out there. We had a silly one. Which one would you rather buy on the shortened holiday week? Gun to your head. Both Oatly and Nikola were both trading around $1.20 when we posted this. And surprisingly, Nikola ran away with it early, but then Oatly took it over. 56.5% of you folks choosing Oatly, 39.1% choosing Nikola, 4.3% only choosing other. But by the way, if you choose other, what are your write-ins? What else is trading $1.20 that you're looking to buy? I am very curious. But either way, a whoever wins, we lose a type of poll out there. I had someone talking to me recently. They'd heard us talking about Oatly on the network, and they were telling me they had tried it, and they tried the yogurt, and it was no bueno. And I can't speak to the yogurt, listeners. I've only had the ice cream bars, and I've had the oat milk. The oat milk, I wasn't a big fan of the non-flavored one. The ice cream bars, though, with the chocolate on them, pretty freaking good is all I'm going to say. Let's get out to our question of the week this week, and it goes along the lines of what everyone's all hyped up about right now. It's all 0 day all the time. Look at the numbers for August, listeners. 0 day coming in hot. So we're asking this week, 0 DTE, clearly popular with the index options crowd. But what's next? What else you got on the horizon? And so our question this week is quite simply, which product or market or complex do you think should list 0 day options next? Gave you 4 to choose from, your single name stocks, so your Apples and your Teslas, or your commodity options, so it could be energies or ags. Had an interesting show on TWIFO last week, the Once and Future Dr. Vix and I, kind of getting into some fun about the potential for 0 day energy contracts and how there might be some interest in those. Nat gas moving around a lot. Oil certainly top of mind for a lot of people, so maybe some potential there. Crypto, of course, those can move quite a bit at a moment's notice. So your Bitcoins and your ETHs, or the vol complex. Let's talk your VIXs or your VXXs and what have you out there. Let's go around the horn. Let's start with the greasiest of meatballs. Mr. Meatball, sir, what is your vote for which complex should get 0 day options next? They all have their appeals, but they also have their challenges at the same time. And then B, which way do you think our audience is going?
I think crypto would be the most interesting. I think volatility would be impossible. And equity is probably the most realistic. So I'm going to say, but equity will never happen. I'm going to say that I'm going to vote crypto, and I'm going to say the audience is voting equities.
You're throwing out a lot of nevers these days. Never for vol 0 day, never for single name 0 day. You're just throwing a lot of cold water on people these days, sir.
Correct. Well, it's called being realistic. So unless they want to turn these equities into cash settled, and that's an important piece of the 0 DTE, you're never gonna see 0 DTE for equity or for and volatility just would be untenable. So those would be some changes that need to make.
It's called being a party pooper. That's what it's called being, sir. I'm just calling a spade out here as we keep on rolling out there. Uncle Mike had never been accused of being a party pooper. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what is your vote? Which way do you think our audience is going?
Well, I think the audience is definitely going equities, and I'm going to go equities because at some point, Mark's going to be more familiar with settlement and things like that with his floor trading background that I would not be. But here's the bottom line. If it makes money, they'll do it. 0 DTEs make money. And if what they need is to make some type of a cash settled equity, then I think they would make a cash settled equity. And so I think that's going to come because exchanges like making money, and I think they're going to figure out a way of doing that. Is it going to happen overnight? No, but it would not surprise me if it happens sooner than we think because 0 DTEs are very popular.
Never underestimate the profit motive at the end of the day. You're right. Back at the OCC conference or OIC conference this year, there was all the rage when we're going to get single name equity options out there. Obviously, the stumbling block is all the after hours contra exercise. So either you get rid of those, which remember we did a poll about this not too long ago, listeners, or you go the cash settled route. It seemed like we were kind of evenly split, and in the industry as well, about which way is the best way to go. Adding a whole new product, cash settled, just to get these 0 days. At the end of the day, if it makes dollars, it makes sense. So I'm like Uncle Mike. I wouldn't put it past him. And right now, our audience has kind of been all over the place in the early hour of voting here. But now we have stocks taking it with 36.4%, followed by the commodity space. So obviously a lot of you listening TWIFO last week, 27.3%. Also vol sneaking in there as well, 27.3%. So throwing it right back in the face of our resident party pooper, the meatball here. And 9.1% for crypto right now. Again, that just went live about an hour ago. It's going to be fascinating to watch how this ebbs and flows out here as we keep on rolling and go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to Around the Block, the portion of the show where we tell you what we're keeping an eye on until our next episode. Seems like the rally that was kicking off the show is looking a little bit more green. S&P up about 0.2% now. NASDAQ up over about 1.1%. And the Dow up about 0.25% right now. So if you're thinking we're poised for the big fade, the big reversal, intra-show, intra-session, at least so far, that has not materialized, listeners, which means, of course, all of our vol friends continuing to go back down, 1380 out there in VIX coming into the end of the show here. Let's go around the horn. Let's start with the Uncle List of Mics. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what are you keeping an eye on until our next show with the Flowmaster on Thursday?
Well, looking forward to the Flowmaster on Thursday, as always. Watching to see if tech can join this rally. It really has not pushed it thus far, but between now and Thursday, seeing if tech steps in and pushes this even further.
Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. What are you keeping an eye on until the Thursday episode?
Yeah, I mean, I want to see what Apple does. Is it able to get off the mat, or is it going to fail? I want to see whether this rotation into consumer discretionary continues, and I want to see where energy goes, because those are really the driving forces. And then, of course, the bond market. If you're ignoring the bond market, then you're ignoring markets as a whole. That's been the big driver of everything so far this year. Keep an eye on the bond market, because as it goes, I think so goes the market.
And unfortunately, with that music, listeners, so goes our show. Hope you're having a good start to your trading week out there. If you need more in your lives, don't worry. We'll be back in a little bit for all you pro folks with the Crypto Rundown. I got some fun guests joining me in the Crypto Hot Seat this week. Who will it be? You got to tune into the Crypto Rundown to find out. If you're not on the pro side, wait until it hits the network, and then check it out on the on-demand side. And before we go, let's go back around the horn. Let's start with the Uncle List of Mics. Mr. Uncle Mike TOSAW, sir. If folks want more Uncle Mike in their lives, maybe to just reminisce on the glory that is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, where should they go? What should they do?
By all means, we'll talk some Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Check out my website, stcharleswealth.com, or follow me on Twitter, at Mike TOSAW, TOSAW.
And Mr. Meatball, same question for you. If they want to debate flow, or maybe they want to debate your party pooping status on all these zero DTEs, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, head to optionpit.com, and we'll have good, actionable content for you every single day. optionpit.com.
There you go. Check them out every single day out there. We got more coming for you today. Like we said, Crypto Rundown coming up a little bit after this. Back again tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week with your usual array of content until we're back again on Thursday. Another episode of The Option Block. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.